everyone. Welcome to yet another 5-book reviews. I'm trying to catch up on this segment. Today I'm going to be reviewing Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, Listen to the Warm by McKuen, Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, Gone Girl by Gilliam Flynn, and Big Fish by Daniel Wallace. As usual, I have left the time codes below in the description, so if you want to watch this entire video, you totally can. If you are interested in all of these books, or if there are just one or two or a few that are interesting to you, you can definitely click on one of those time codes for each of these books and check out the review just for that book that you're interested in. Let's go ahead and start with Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This book is a bit of a rom-com, if you will. It focuses on, of course, the main character, Chloe Brown, who is a computer geek who also has fibromyalgia. So she suffers from a lot of chronic pain, and sometimes she feels like that has made her kind of stop living her best life. So she decides that she's not going to let it stop her anymore, and she's going to make a list, if you will, of all the things that she wants to do, and she's going to check off that list. While in the endeavor to do this, she ends up meeting the character Red, and he has gone through some relationship troubles of his own and also feels like he's going through some stuff and needs to overcome it, and these two characters meet, and initially it doesn't go very well. But after a while, we realize that we have some fun stuff in common, and that maybe we should be friends, or more than friends. I am not somebody that reads romance books. I do like classic book romance, like romance that goes on in classic books, and I do to a certain extent like quirky romance, so it has to have some like thing that's a side thing other than just the romance part. But I was in the mood to step out of my comfort zone and also to read a book that would give me a giggle because, you know, life be kind of hard sometimes, and I wanted something sort of light. And so I decided to pick this book up, and I did end up, for the most part, really enjoying it. I really love Chloe and Red. I think they're really well-developed characters. I really liked that their relationship was very much about trying to overcome our own personal obstacles before we jump into a relationship so that we can both be good partners to each other. And I think it's a very healthy relationship in that way. Like, they both had things to work on, but we made the choice to work on those things so that we could be kind to each other. And I think that kind of is nice in a romance book because not all romance, from what I can tell, but some romance does romanticize sometimes negative things that we probably shouldn't be romanticizing. This book does not romanticize that stuff. It romanticizes like actually good, caring about each other, working on yourself to be a good partner stuff, as I said. So I really appreciated that aspect of it. I also really like some of the side characters. Like, Chloe's sisters are quite humorous. I particularly like her little sister because she always pronounces words wrong and people correct her, and it totally reminds me of Amy in Little Women, and it cracks me up. In terms of the two main characters, they are kind of having an adult coming of age moment, which is something that I really enjoy in books because I think adults can have coming of age moments too, and I really appreciated that. I think it's a really empowering sort of book in terms of not letting things stop you from doing the things that you want to do. Even before she decides to make the list, she doesn't let stuff get her down. She really does try to do as much as she can with what she has going on with her life. And I really think that is so meaningful to people that are going through anything, not just chronic pain, but like anything that you feel like keeps you down, and you don't let it. So you go, Chloe, you go, girl. This also does have a nice British humor to it, which is something that I really enjoy. So the only thing that I didn't really enjoy in this book, but I knew I wasn't going to enjoy if it was included in this book, so I didn't fill out the book for this because it is a romance book, and love scenes and sex scenes are going to be a part of it. And that kind of thing in books is just not my cup of tea. I don't really enjoy scenes like that. I don't enjoy a lot of kissy face or a lot of making out or sex scenes. It's just not something that I find particularly sexy, honestly. I'm somebody that finds intellectual connection and emotional connection just way more interesting. Maybe that makes me a dork, weird, prudish nerd, but I don't care. This is like obviously a little more than what would be in maybe a YA book or some YA books, but it's not like, from what I know, because obviously I don't read erotica, but I wouldn't consider it full-on erotica. So there's enough plot in this that there were only a few sections, a few pages where I literally just scanned, because that just doesn't interest me. If you are looking for something just light and fun with well-developed characters, I would recommend this. I would say that this is on par with a really well-done, big-budget movie that's a rom-com, I would say. It's better than like some of the TV rom-com movies. So if you like that kind of vibe, I definitely think that you would find something fun or interesting. I occasionally like that type of thing. So even though it's not necessarily in my comfort zone, and maybe it might not necessarily be in yours, I think you will still get a giggle out of this if it sounds interesting to you and you like accomplishing lists, because I do like that part. So I gave this book 4 stars. On to Listen to the Warm. There isn't really a summary for this one because it is just a collection of poetry. Now, in terms of poetry books, I think this is one of the better ones that I have read in its entirety. Usually I read poetry books and short story books, or I choose to read them sort of one poem at a time, every other time when I feel like reading something. And that's usually because there ends up being, in its entirety with a poetry book, a few that you love, a few that you like, a lot that are just meh. However, I would say with Listen to the Warm that every poem in this is well structured and pretty good. Were there ones that I loved more than others? Definitely yes. But everyone in this was at least well put together enough that I found it interesting, or the wording was really fun to read, or something. There was something good about pretty much every single poem in this, which is, to me, a rarity with poetry collections. I really liked Rod McKuen's style in general. It is occasionally very story-oriented, which I thought was really fun. And the first half of it does have a lot of story elements to it, and I thought that was really fun to invest in. I found it very interesting too that the poetry in here still is applicable to current times, even though I think it was written in the 60s. So I like the longevity of the concepts in the poetry in this. So yes, definitely would highly recommend this. I gave this 4.5 stars. Next we have Monday's Not Coming, which is a hard-hitting YA contemporary. It centers around a young girl named Claudia who comes back from her summer vacation and realizes that her best friend Monday has gone missing. The story follows her as she tries to figure out what has happened to Monday, or at least get an adult invested in figuring that situation out, and also follows her struggles with her learning disability as well as what is going on with her life in general. I did enjoy a lot of elements of this book. I think the writing is really beautifully done. I do think that it's a very important book, and I really like that it explores the concept of really taking notice and caring about the youth and caring about noticing things about your friends. But not only that, it, for an adult reader, to me, really heads up the point that we really need to do something if we see something wrong in our society, especially when it comes to children and reporting things if we need to, etc., etc. There is an aspect not just of what's going on with Monday and her being missing, but also what's going on with Claudia herself and her learning disability, and how that could be handled with adults, like really taking care to notice things like that and really take, care in terms of making sure that people and kids have the help they need in terms of that aspect. So I really appreciated that as well. I also really like the character of Claudia, and I related to a lot of things going on in her life. We are both dancers and we both have a learning disability. And so there's a lot too that she does that I found quite relatable, and I thought that was just something interesting and fun. One of the few things that are fun about this book. Now, the thing about this book is that it is very, very hard-hitting. There's not any really balance of humor, so don't look for that. It's definitely going to hurt you in your soul and probably not let up until the end of the book. Now, that's fine if you know what you're getting into. I feel like I was adequately prepared for that, so I wasn't surprised. But now you also are adequately prepared for that. Well, I do think this is an important book, and there were quite a few aspects of it that I liked. There were also things that I had qualms with, and they were very important, big things that I had qualms with. And some of them I might not have qualms with upon a reread, but I've only read it one time. So here we go with the somewhat negatives on this book. The first one is the execution of the non-linear timeline. Now, I get why it has a non-linear timeline, but the way it's executed is a little bit weird upon this initial reading. So the way this book is situated is that it is set both before a specific event and after the event. The book is separated into sections that are called the before, the after, and usually something to the extent of 2 years before the before, or 3 weeks after the after. So you could see how that could get confusing after a certain point of time, and you would kind of lose where you were in terms of the timeline, since it is non-linear. Now, the other thing is that it turned out in the end, I'm not going to spoil you, that the event that I thought the before and after wasn't what I thought it was. So when I got to the section or the reveal in the book, I felt like I imagined the book completely wrong, and that threw me for a bit of a loop. And I have to admit, I was not entirely happy when that happened. So there is that. So I definitely think, while I love a non-linear timeline when it is done a certain way, I'm not sure it was as effective as it could have been in this particular book. But like I said, now that I know what happens, maybe I wouldn't be as thrown for a loop, and I might enjoy this more upon a reread in terms of that aspect. My other issue with this is that I do feel like it could have been more focused on its themes and topics. I think it is trying to cover every topic that Claudia encounters, and I really would have preferred it just focus on her figuring out what is going on with Monday, or trying to get people involved with that, and maybe one other thing, because when it tries to cover just so many social aspects and so many things, I think the real point of the book gets a little bit muddled and lost. It's not totally lost, but I think certain elements would have been more impactful had we left out trying to cover every social issue. I think it should have been streamlined to 1 to 3 social issues at tops, and it would have been slightly more pinpointed and effective. I did also listen to this occasionally in audiobook. I would say that it's a very solid audiobook, very well read, so I would recommend that if you want to check out this book. I feel like you, no matter what, would have to be really aware of that timeline element, but if you can feel like you can keep track of that while listening, you'll be fine. In the end, after much debate, I decided to give this a 4-star rating. I think it's a very good, important book, but I do think those qualms kept me from getting to the 4.5 or 5-star rating, and it's not quite at a 4.25 star rating. Maybe it would be upon a reread, like I said. And I am willing to give this another read at some point in the next, few years. So we will see what I think of it then. But for now, 4 stars. There's a bit of a theme here because now we're going to talk about Gone Girl, a book that is also about somebody going missing. It centers around a man named Nick. One day he comes home and his house has been ransacked and his wife is missing. And the whole story follows not only trying to find his wife Amy, but exploring the trials of their marriage, as well as Nick having to deal with the fact that he is obviously husband. So he is obviously the suspect in this case, and it causes some cray issues. This is another one that I kind of have qualms with, but I also found really interesting in a social and psychological way, and so thus it is still a really excellent book. First of all, this is my first Gilliam Flynn book, and I quite enjoy the writing style. The writing style was bomb. It was probably my favorite thing about it, and I was listening to this in audiobook, so I think that really shows how quality the writing came through, even through just listening. I also think that this is a really well-developed book in terms of character. I think this is such an excellent character study on these main characters and these people and their motivations. They are definitely flawed individuals with a lot of issues, and I definitely think this is the most interesting exploration in terms of sociopathic behavior that I've read in a long time, at least, or maybe ever. I don't think sociopathic behavior has ever been written so unconventionally or so interestingly, and I really thought that was particularly well done. And also, I thought it was very well done to show how different people react to things in a different way and how that can be observed by the public and the media. I'm trying to explain my qualm with this without spoiling you. I'm not going to deeply spoil you. I think I can do it without deeply spoiling anyone. But the thing about this book that I mainly had an issue with was that the end was not satisfying, and usually I'm fine with an unsatisfying ending, but I guess the way the characters were developed and things like that and the situation itself, I just really wanted a certain character to have their comeuppance. I wanted that satisfying comeuppance moment, and I don't feel like I really got it. And honestly, in the book's defense, I don't think it's a story where you can get it, just because of the way the situation is. So in a way, the book ends in a very realistic way, which is to be appreciated. But, the fiction moment inside of me is like, did I really want that, or did I want something satisfying? And sometimes it's good when there's a lack of satisfaction, but I think because this book is so mired with sort of the dark topics of it, it's a very dark book, and I think it's a very cynical book. After undergoing all that, to have a moment where you don't get satisfied at the end makes it very hard to view the book overall as something that you'd want to read again. On the flip side, it is a thriller-esque book that has a very interesting approach to it. And also, up until a certain point of the book, I hadn't really guessed what was happening yet, which is something that usually happens to me. And so the reveals were pretty interesting. Like I said, did listen to this in audiobook. Excellent audiobook. It has 2 narrators, so it has one for Amy, one for Nick. I really like those dual narrator ones on these ones that switch perspectives. So if you like audiobooks like that, definitely check out that audiobook. It's an excellent one. Gone Girl, if you wondered if it was worth reading because it is awfully hyped, I think it is worth checking out for sure. But I definitely think that it is something that I would only give 4 stars, which is what I gave. But I usually give a lot of mainstream thrillers that rating. I like them. I don't usually love them. So that's what we have with Gone Girl. And now you know what you're getting with that book. And now it is time for some magical realism. And we're going to talk about Big Fish. So Big Fish is the story of a man who is going to see his dying father, and his father is incapable of kind of staying serious in the situation, and also has all these crazy stories about his life that he has told his son over all this time. So he will take sort of a certain instance in his life and either make a joke out of it, or he will make it like this big fantastical story that's just kind of impossible. And the story basically is about the main character sort of not only dealing with his father's eventual passing, but also him dealing with the idea that your parents can both be heroes in your mind as well as genuinely just people that have flaws and issues and their own things going on, and how that character reconciles with that. So that element of the book that I just said is actually one of the best elements of the book. I really like that concept that you can hero worship your parent and also find things about them that are just human and weren't perfect and maybe even messed you up a little bit. But, you know, that is life, and that is, you know, even parents are not perfect human beings. And I really think that is a cool concept to explore, and it's of course explored in this magical realism way, and it really is nice to see this character like come to some realizations with it. Also, the crazy stories about the father are quite fun to read. I really like Daniel Wallace's writing. This is the second book I've read by Daniel Wallace, and his magical realism just has such a quirk to it that's really enjoyable, and the characters are always amazingly odd in a good way, and his books are very, very weird, but they're very structured in their weirdness, which is how I like my book. I like some structured weirdness in my book, and I think Big Fish does this excellently. This one is another one that I did listen to in audiobook. I quite like both this one and The Kings and Queens of Rome, which is the other Daniel Wallace book, in audiobook. They do have a fairy tale for adults sort of aspect to both of them. So because of that, having it read to you is quite nice, and the reader of this book is very solid, very well done with the reading. So I would highly recommend checking this out in audiobook, but it is of course an extremely short book, so you definitely could read it in print and just read it really quick. It's a very quick short read with just like a nice overarching theme and some very quirky stories going on. So definitely love this one. It's weird in the best way, so I gave this one 5 stars. Those were my 5 book reviews for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts on these books. Drop me a comment below to either say hello or offer some thoughts on any of these books, or if you plan to read any of these books. And that is it for the day, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon. Bye!